Between 2008 and 2012, Ciudad Juarez became something few modern cities ever experience. A sustained urban battlefield,
the violence sparked by the military killing of an infamous cartel leader has now spread across at least 2/3 of Mexico's states.
shaped not by ideology, but by logistics.
And 90% of the drugs coming here are from Mexico.
The drug cartels are waging war in America.
In 2010 alone, more than 3,000 people were killed within its limits.
Violence has broken out in several cities across Mexico.
At its peak, 8 to 10 homicides occurred every day. The murder rate exceeded 200 per 100,000 residents.
Cartel, fire and fury turning the streets of Mexican tourist hotspot.
One of the highest ever recorded in a contemporary city outside a formally declared war zone. For a period, Juarez was widely described as the most violent city in the world. The violence was not spontaneous. It was not civic collapse. It was the predictable collision of geography, cartel realignment, and federal militarization concentrated in a single strategic corridor. Juarez sits directly across from El Paso, one of the busiest legal border crossings in North America. For decades, this corridor represented one of the most efficient narcotics gateways into the United States. Cocaine from South America,
including leading a sprawling criminal enterprise that distributed more than 1.5 million kilograms of cocaine.
Methamphetamine produced in clandestine laboratories, heroin from the Sierra Madre, later synthetic opioids. Control of Juarez meant control of access, and access translated into billions of dollars. The plaza within cartel vocabulary, Juarez was not merely a city. It was a plaza, a trafficking corridor that determined which organization controlled wholesale entry into U.S. markets. For years, that plaza was dominated by the Juarez cartel, historically linked to the Carrillo Fuentes family. The arrangement, while violent, was relatively stable, but by the mid-2000s, Mexico's criminal landscape was shifting. The Sinaloa cartel, under the leadership of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, was expanding aggressively across northern Mexico. Strategic consolidation required access to the most profitable corridors. Juarez was not optional. It was essential. The break, the rupture became visible in 2008. Assassinations increased. Enforcement wings mobilized. The Juarez cartel relied heavily on La Línea, a network of former and active police officers functioning as its enforcement arm. Sinaloa-affiliated operatives entered the city, attempting to displace existing control. What began as targeted killings escalated into sustained confrontation. Gunfire erupted in residential neighborhoods. Highways became ambush zones. Police officers were assassinated in patrol cars. Bodies were left in public intersections. The city's geography amplified the stakes. Unlike rural cartel wars, Juarez was dense, industrial, and economically integrated into cross-border supply chains. Violence did not occur at the margins. It unfolded in full view of civilians. Militarization. By 2009, homicides exceeded 2,500 annually. The federal government, under President Felipe Calderón, intensified its national security strategy. Thousands of soldiers and federal police were deployed into Juarez. Military convoys patrolled main avenues. Checkpoints divided neighborhoods. Tactical units occupied public spaces. The state entered the battlefield. Yet deployment did not immediately stabilize the city. Instead, violence peaked. The apex in 2010, Juarez recorded over 3,000 homicides. Entire weeks passed in which funerals outnumbered weddings. Businesses closed before dusk. Nighttime traffic disappeared from certain districts. Thousands of families relocated, some to other Mexican states, others across the border into Texas. The violence was strategic but relentless. In January 2010, gunmen opened fire at a birthday party in Villas de Salvarcar, killing 15 young people. The attack was widely interpreted as part of cartel retaliation cycles. Public outrage intensified scrutiny of federal strategy. In July 2010, a car bomb detonated in downtown Juarez, killing several individuals, including a federal police officer. While car bombs were rare in Mexico's broader drug war, their use in Juarez signaled escalation beyond conventional enforcement tactics. The message was clear. This was no longer isolated criminality. It was urban warfare. Civilian terrain. The structural reality of Juarez between 2008 and 2012 was stark. When multiple armed organizations contest a city of more than 1 million residents, civilian space becomes operational terrain. High-caliber rifles were recovered routinely from crime scenes. Federal operations targeting cartel leaders disrupted established hierarchies across Mexico. As leadership structures fractured, organizations competed aggressively for high-value plazas. Juarez became the focal point of that competition. By late 2010 and into 2011, however, homicide numbers began to decline. Violence peaks during contestation and declines once dominance is established. Stability in this context reflects resolution of competition, not elimination of criminal enterprise. Aftermath: by 2012, homicide totals had fallen substantially compared to the 2010 apex. Some displaced residents returned. Businesses reopened cautiously. Public life resumed incrementally. But the cumulative impact of those years remained. Between 2008 and 2012, more than 10,000 people were killed in Ciudad Juarez. Second, fragmentation magnifies volatility. When rival networks compete for high-value corridors amid national leadership disruptions, violence escalates rapidly. Third, militarized intervention can suppress open conflict, but does not eliminate the economic incentives underpinning trafficking networks. Fourth, consolidation reduces visible violence, but does not necessarily restore institutional primacy. Juarez did not become violent by accident. It became violent because its location made it indispensable. By the mid-2000s, other regions in Mexico experienced surges in violence. The epicenter shifted. Juarez no longer carried the designation of the world's most violent city, but its peak years remain instructive. They demonstrated how rapidly an industrial metropolis can transform into contested ground when organized crime adopts paramilitary tactics and strategic infrastructure is at stake. They exposed the fragility of municipal governance under sustained armed competition. They illustrated that in modern cartel warfare, urban centers are not peripheral. They are prizes. Ciudad Juarez was not predetermined to become the most violent city in cartel history. It was an industrial hub, a border economy, a node in North American trade. What transformed it was convergence, strategic geography, cartel rivalry, national militarization. At its worst point, Juarez's homicide rate rivaled active conflict zones. Yet the war was not ideological. It was commercial, a struggle over routes, revenue, and leverage embedded within civilian infrastructure. The violence eventually subsided. The bridges remained. The routes remained. And in the strategic calculus of organized crime, geography does not disappear. It waits.